What is going on with the All Points East Festival that Twin One Pilots are playing next August? It initially looked like it was just going to be another festival stop for the band, as they did some festival performances and appearances into 2026. But then, as I mentioned in a video last week, some interesting lore connections began to appear, and the band themselves began teasing this All Points East Festival as something that might be a little more connected to the lore than we originally thought, especially playing into this notion of East is Up and All Points East, that connection there. As well as a teaser video announcing that they were coming to London with the torchbearer holding a flag with the name of the city, London, displayed on it. But then, this user on the Twin One Pilots subreddit named Sensitive Bid pointed out that near the All Points East Festival location in Victoria Park, there are a number of different shops and businesses that have names which relate to the lore, and together they seem to form an arrow as well. So I saw this, and the first thing that came to my mind, and probably came to yours as well, was this question. Is this on purpose? Is these connections here on purpose, or are they merely a coincidence? It certainly brings to mind something like the Clancy Way location in Ohio that I discussed in a video back in September. And in that case, it seems pretty clear that a lot of the locations and the points on the map of the geography of Clancy Way probably influenced what we then saw in the lore. Names like Clancy, the shape of the city of Dema, the direction of east, and all sorts of things like that, the map of Dema and that part of Trench as well. If you're not entirely sure what I'm talking about, feel free to go check out that video that I made discussing Clancy Way. But in this case here, it seems very unlikely that these locations were intentionally named this way to line up with these points of the lore. But at the same time, it is very interesting and strange that they do. I mean, we have Trench Studio, Nico's Bar, Bandito Burger, and a Torchbearer Court, which is an apartment complex. So is there a sense in which these businesses have cropped up to take advantage of the fact that Twin One Pilots are going to be appearing here? I mean, Torchbearer Court, that doesn't really make sense. It's an apartment complex. But Bandito Burger, Nico's Bar, Trench Studio, there could be an element, at least with the Bandito Burger, that they're kind of pop-up shops related to the festival, trying to capitalize on the fact that Twin One Pilots are coming with lore that relates to these names. That's one possibility. It seems kind of unlikely. Or did the band themselves notice they're playing All Points East? We can tie that into East is Up, and there's also a bunch of other stores around which have names that relate to our lore and the story that we've been building. So let's really lean into the lore for this festival, get people hyped, and that way there can be some kind of extra Easter eggs and bonus details connected to this location to get people even more excited and even more invested in the lore and the story as we come into 2026. So with that in mind, I wanted to take a closer look at the businesses featured here, see if there is any way in which we can discover some kind of answer to these questions to try to figure out what the timeline is here. How long have these businesses actually been around? But before we get into that, there was one other detail that I wanted to kind of touch upon. So here on the map, we see this is where the All Points East Festival is going to take place. If we go up Victoria Park, we get into this area up here. This is where the businesses are to be found. They don't all show up on the map all at once, but I will bring them up one by one in a moment. But first, if we go down to the bottom here, just wanted to point out there is a road here called Bishop's Way, reminiscent of Clancy's Way, Bishop's Way. It's a short road, and not that surprising for London that a road there would be called Bishop's Way. I tried to do a bit of historical research into this road. Obviously, again, it's not a very prominent road in this area. It's short. It doesn't go very far, and so on. And so there wasn't a ton of information to be found. The sort of AI summary that the internet search provider gave me seems, one, a little generic, and two, not very well sourced. We have a Wikipedia source, which when I went into Wikipedia didn't have anything about Bishop's Way. And then also this site, which I can't open, maybe because I'm not in the UK, but also it just seems to be kind of a broken link. But all in all, it does seem to be vaguely related to bishops that used to own some estates in the area of London. And so this, the area as a whole was sort of named after them, and then the road as well was named as a sort of remnant to their memory. Again, it would be silly to assume or even try to theorize that a road like this would be named Bishop's Way after the lore, or even that the lore brought in the idea of bishops because of this road. But it's yet another piece of information, a piece of geography here that is like uncannily connected. And I'm afraid that's probably something I'm going to keep saying throughout this video. And the video is going to end, spoiler, probably with me saying, this is just weird and interesting. But why? Why are all these connections here? Is there actually something we're supposed to be learning from this? Or is it just merely coincidence and a coincidence that the band themselves want to play into as they tease this show? So with that aside, let's actually look at some of these businesses. So this is Trench Studio. It seems to be kind of a modeling agency. And the website didn't have a ton of information about how long they've been around, so I went to the old Instagram, which also doesn't have a ton on it. But this post, the earliest post, is from 2023. So it is in a post-Trench era. Now, of course, when I say that, I'm not trying to imply that the name of this studio was chosen after the album Trench or to play into that world. It's more to try to figure out what came first, and if that has any kind of implication for, like we saw with Clancy Way, why these locations were named, or what the connection might be between the story and the All Points East Festival. There are a lot of coincidences. Far too many almost for comfort. But it does seem like way too much of a stretch to say there is a real connection here, which is why it's so weird. Next up, we have this business Bandito Burger. And one of the things that was interesting as I was kind of looking on Google Maps and looking at all of these businesses is that besides the Trench Studio one, they don't actually have any associated websites. Perhaps that's not actually all that uncommon, especially for small businesses or small eateries like this to not really have a website so much as a social media presence, be more focused on kind of building out their brand and getting people aware of their business through social media and not really feeling the need to have a website. But it was interesting because some of the other places around that area did have websites, but this one didn't. Even the apartment complex, Torchbearer Court. Even that apartment complex didn't have its own website, which is a little odd for an apartment complex, but we'll look at that more in a second. This basically just has a social media presence. Their oldest post, from what I was able to find, is from 2021. There is a sort of website that features them, but again, doesn't have any date displaying how long they've been active. It seems like at least since 2021, but again, it's just kind of a small burger shack. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy. So I'm not shocked there isn't a ton of information about them online. And then next we come to the Torchbearer Court saga, where I spent more time than I probably should have trying to find any information I possibly could about this location. It shows up on a couple of like rental sites where you can try to rent an apartment. Seems a little pricey as well for what it is for a one bedroom, but it seems like it's kind of an expensive area. Because, I mean, even in dollars, that would be a lot for a one bedroom, but that's in pounds, so it's even more money. But I guess they seem like decent enough apartments, and apparently they come furnished for what that's worth. But again, there's no associated website with this, so it was really hard to find a ton of actual, like, factual information about it. I did find on this site that one of the flats or apartments had sold in 2018, and that's really before, I think, the concept of the Torchbearer was introduced to the dema story. Now, perhaps the Torchbearer was in the letters. I'm trying to remember now exactly when Josh was named as Torchbearer. But regardless, it's around when Trench came out, really not that much longer after. Obviously, the apartment complex existed long before that. So again, there's no way you can really claim here that this was in any way connected or named after the lore, or that, 21 Pilots worked with the complex or these pop-up shops to kind of give them these names, right? So again, this is all really interesting and really curious. Why do these connections exist? And at the end of the day, unfortunately, after all this research, after everything that I just showed you, the only thing we can rule out is that these aren't pop-ups that have shown up in connection to the upcoming festival. Unless this was planned before Trench even came out, right? During the hiatus, Tyler sat down and called all of these businesses, right? Like, I don't see how that's in any way possible. Some people have theorized online that maybe this is all, and that would make sense, right? That these are pop-up shops and locations that are trying to capitalize on the fact that 21 Pilots is coming to play this festival, and so let's name our businesses for a short period of time after these parts of the lore and to get people interested. I mean, we're talking about their businesses right now. It's kind of free publicity for them. But that does not in any way seem to be what's happening here. So then the question has to be asked, why are so many of these businesses in such a concentrated area with names that relate to the lore of a band that is playing the All Points East Festival in August, right? Less than a year from now. And of course, there's Bishop's Way that we talked about as well, all the way down here. Again, I think it's way too much of a stretch to try to make a ton of association there, but it's yet another element that connects. So what is really going on here? I'm afraid I don't really have an answer right now. It's odd. At the very least, it's interesting. And my theory right now is really just that the band noticed this. They agreed to play the All Points East Festival and noticed that there are a number of different spots and locations around there that tie into the story that they've been telling. And so they took that and thought, okay, let's really double down and tie into the lore for this one. Let's put out a teaser that has the torchbearer and the car and all these different kind of lore elements, and let's start teasing with East is Up, the East is Up slogan, and Rock Sound will cover, and all of that kind of stuff, right? The band is choosing to lean into it given the location, and the location kind of influenced that choice, and that's why we're seeing that more with this festival than any of the other festivals that they've teased. Again, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't seen anyone else talking about lore elements to the other festivals that they're teasing. It's really just this one. It's somewhat of a developing story. I covered this last week, and a lot of this information wasn't known, at least to me. So if there's anything new that comes up, I'm sure I will provide an update. If there's any information that you have, let me know in the comments. I'd be curious to know more. If any of you happen to live in the UK and know this area, or have gone around, have maybe eaten or visited one of these businesses, let me know. I'd be curious to know more information about that. It all seems to be one big coincidence, but it's also a very interesting and uncanny coincidence that this is lining up so perfectly. And I'm also very curious to know what the performance is going to be like at this festival. It seems like there's going to be an FPE pop-up exhibit. Will we get another letter? Will we get something more from the torchbearer? Will we get a letter from Clancy, who is now Nico? Will the lore, which I thought had finished with that final letter at the LA FPE show, will it be continued in some way next August from the FPE or the show itself? So I'm excited, I'm intrigued, and I'm very, very curious to continue to learn more about this show. Let me know in the comments what you think, and as always, don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.